This is the tutorial for Chapter 6, Section 3, titled Solving Systems Using Elimination, Day Number 2. So let's take a look at our first problem here. And it's asking us to solve this system. So we don't see the brace around it, but typically they'll put a brace around that. So it means to solve a system. And I see that we don't have the x's and y's lined up. So I need to make it so all the x's and y's are lined up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the 4y from both sides. Just move the y's and x's to the other side so that it's in the standard form. So I see 3x minus 4y equals negative 5. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'll move the 9x over, so it's going to be a negative 9x plus 12y equals 15. So what I want to do now is I want to try to cancel something out. So let's do this. Let's multiply this top equation by 3. See, I do that, and what ends up happening is this will make a 9x, and that will end up canceling out the negative 9x. So I go ahead and do that, and I'll rewrite that equation down below here. I'm left with 9x minus 12y equals negative 15. Well, take a look at what happens here. Not only the x is canceled out, but the y's canceled out too. They're the same numbers but opposite signs, and the 15. So I'm left with 0 equals 0. Everything canceled, and I'm left with an identity. So whenever I have that situation, that means that the lines are the same. We had the same line. So both lines were exactly the same. So if we have the same line with two lines being the same line, that means we have an infinitely many solutions is what we'll have as our answer. So let's take a look at the next problem, and we have a different situation. Here x's and y's are all lined up, so I'm ready to go ahead and add this. And look at what happens again. The x's cancel, the y's cancel to make 0, but on the other side of the equal sign, I'm just left with 2. These numbers do not equal. This is not an identity. Notice how x's and y's are gone, though, so it's one of two answers. It's either the same line or parallel lines. In this case, we have parallel lines. Parallel lines, and what that means is the lines will not cross. The lines will not cross. And so if they don't cross, that means we have no solution. So typically we just had one solution with most of the problems we saw. And that's where we got an x value, we got a y value. But here we had infinitely many solutions because we had the same line with an identity. And here we did not have an identity, so we had parallel lines, no solution. Now let's take a look at some word problems. First one says a farm raises a total of 220 chickens and pigs. So the number of legs of the stock in the farm is 520. How many chickens and pigs are there? So we have two equations from the two sentences. So let's go ahead and start with defining a variable here. And I'm going to say C equals the number of chickens, where we'll go with P is the number of pigs. So I can write down an equation like this. C plus P equals 220. But then it talks about legs. So we have to know something about the legs of a chicken. There are 2 legs on a chicken and 4 legs on a pig. And there is a total of 520 legs. So now we've got our two equations, we can go ahead and solve. And elimination works really well with this problem. I'm going to multiply by negative 2. Because they're asking for both. They want to know how many chickens and pigs. And it's just easier multiplying by 2, or negative 2, rather than negative 4. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I end up with this. Negative 2c minus 2p equals negative 440. So I'm going to add the two equations together, and I'm left with 2p equals, and I end up having to borrow a little bit, so it's going to leave me with 80. And so from there, I do some division, and there are 40 pigs. To find out how many chickens, it's easiest to go into that quantity equation and subtract the 40 from 220. So C equals 220 minus the 40 pigs that I have, and that's going to end up where this farmer has, and they have 180 chickens. So let's move on to the next problem, and it looks as though you drive a car that runs on ethanol and gas. You have a 20-gallon tank to fill, and you can buy fuel at either 25% ethanol or 85% ethanol. And how much of each type of fuel should you buy? So to fill your tank with a 50% alcohol or percent ethanol mixture. And so what we're going to end up doing is starting off with defining some variables. So let's call the 25% mixture, 25% ethanol. We're going to say that equals X. And then I'll say the 85% ethanol equals Y. And so now I'm ready to set up an equation. I know that X plus Y equals 20. I want a number of gallons of the 25%, number of gallons of 85% equals 20 gallons altogether. And then I set it up by finding out how much. Okay, this is the amount of, I should really say, gallons of the 25%, gallons of the 85%. And so now I'm going to find out how much the percentage is. So 25% times by the number of gallons of the 25% ethanol, and then I have 0.85 times the number of gallons of the 85% ethanol, and then that equals, and then I need a 50% mixture, so I'm going to do 50% of the 20 gallons. And so I have 0.25x plus 0.85y equals, and then I have 10, because half of 20 is 10. So now I'm ready to solve. I've got two equations. Let's go ahead and write them next to each other. It's a little easier to see that way. X plus y equals 20, and I have 0.25x plus 0.85y equals 10. So I want to cancel out one of these terms. I'm going to go ahead and multiply maybe this top equation by negative 0.25. And so if I do that, I get negative 0.25x, negative 0.25y, and on this side, a quarter of 20. A quarter of 20 is 5, and that's going to be negative. So again, I thought of 0.25 as just being 1/4. That made the math a little easier. And so I go ahead and subtract, and I've got 0.6y equals 5. So when I do that division, I'm dividing 0.6 into 5. So I move that decimal point over, add the 0, and when I go ahead and do that, 6 goes into 50. We'll go with 9, no, almost 9 times, 8 times. So that makes 48. We've got 2 left over, so it's 2 6. So it's going to be 8 1/3. So y equals 8 1/3 gallons. So that's of the, and y represents the 85%. 8 1/3 gallons of 85% ethanol. And so that's why it's nice to write down what your y value equals. Otherwise, you wouldn't have remembered. And so to find the other one, all I have to do is subtract this 8 1/3 from the total of 20. And so when I do that, I've got a fraction. And so I'm going to end up having to borrow from this 20, change it to 19, and that's going to be, that was 1/3 there, so I'm going to make this 3/3. And that way I can do the subtraction. So you see how you're left with 2/3, and you do the subtraction, you get 11 2/3. So 11 2/3 gallons of the 25%. So that's that problem. Let's move on to a couple other problems that we might end up seeing. And here it is. Your math test has 38 questions and is worth 200 points. The test consists of multiple choice questions worth 4 points and an open-ended question worth 20 points each. So how many of each type? So let's do this. Let's call the number of multiple choice, MC, I'll do M/C, equals X. And we'll say the number of open-ended equals Y, we'll say. So we saw that there were 38 questions. So the number of multiple choice plus the number of open-ended equals 38. Now their values, that's the 200 points part. So multiple choice is 4 points times the number of multiple choice questions, 20 points times the number of open-ended questions, and that value is 200. So let's go ahead and multiply this by -4, the top equation, and it'll be, make the numbers a little bigger here, -4x minus 4y equals, that makes 32. Carry a 3, it makes 15. So 12 and 3 make 15. And so that's negative there, and I do some subtraction. So I got 16y equals 48. And so I see that y goes in there evenly. It's 3 times. So 3, well, what's y? Y is the open-ended. So we got 3 open open-ended questions. So 3 open-ended questions. Again, that's why I like to define the variable so I know what I get when I solve. And let's find out how many of the other. Well, just take that 3 away from 38, the total. That leaves us with 35 multiple choice questions. Well, look at the next one. It says a student bought 3 boxes of pencils, 2 boxes of pens for $6. Bought 2 boxes of pencils, 4 boxes of pens for $8. Find the cost of each box of pencils. Why don't we call this one X? And that's X equals the cost of the pencils. And we'll go with Y equals the cost of the pens. So we're going to write the two equations. 3x plus 2y equals 6. That's the first one. 3 boxes of pencils, 2 boxes of pens. Now I got 2 boxes of pencils, so that's 2x, and 4 boxes of pens for $8. So 4y equals 8. So a great way to solve this is to multiply that top equation by -2. That'll cancel out the y terms, so we've got -6x minus 4y equals -12. So when I add that together, I got -4x equals -4. So dividing by -4 leaves us with x equals 1. So it's $1. $1 for x. What's x represent? X is the box of pencils. So $1 for a box of pencils. And we substitute back into one of the equations. I'm going to pick let's go with the 2x. So 2 times by 1 plus 4y equals 8. So I'll subtract the 2, and I've got 4y equals 6. Do some division, and I've got a decimal there. So y is, and then divide 4 into 6, or this is the same thing as 3 halves, which makes 1.5. So $1.50 is the cost of a box of pens. Again, it's real important to make sure you define your variables so that you can go back and figure out what your answer represents once you are done. So those are types of problems that you're going to see on tonight's homework. Good luck.